My name is Antonio Jones. In 2004 and in 2011, I was wrongfully convicted of 4 counts of felony murder and sentenced to serve 240 years in prison for a crime I did not commit. This is my story, the Tony story.
Lord, I surrender. The story and case of Antonio D. Jones. I already know the time before I open my eyes. 3:30 a.m. It's the same every day. I say a silent prayer thanking my Lord and Savior for waking me up this morning, for my good health and my sound mind despite my current residence and circumstances. Thereafter, I ask God to forgive me of all my sins and those I may have offended in any way, and to give me the heart to forgive those who have wronged or offended me. Furthermore, I make my bed, brush my teeth, wash my face, get dressed, pull on my boots, and head into work. I imagine it's the same routine for countless other hard-working Americans, with one minor exception. Instead of a house or an apartment, my home is an 8 by 10 foot concrete box with a rolling metal door and a stainless steel toilet. Then there's the one major difference between me and the other prisoners. I am innocent. Now, I know what you are thinking to yourself. A lot of people in prison profess their innocence, which is absolutely true. However, what separate me from them are my 2 alibi witnesses who attested to my whereabouts during the commission of the crime, but only one of my 2 witnesses were called to testify. The fact that the state of Indiana and the courts echo the fact that there was no physical evidence connecting me to the scene of the crime, other than the false story/testimony by Lenzo Aaron III. No blood, ballistic evidence, DNA, murder weapon, no other witnesses, or other evidence directly connecting me to the scene of the killings. In addition to the fact that the United States Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit in Jones v. Basinger found Aaron's testimony to be inherently unbelievable and inconsistent with other evidence. In addition to the federal court's credibility determination, there was overwhelming physical evidence contradicting Aaron's testimony/versions of events via my alibi witness, B, the victim, Anthony McClendon's cellular phone records, C, my cellular phone records, D, numerous crime scene photos, E, the autopsy diagram of Loris Jones, and F, numerous inconsistencies in Aaron's testimony proving that he was not a credible or reliable source. Despite the evidence failing to support a worthy and reliable conviction, I was still convicted and sentenced to serve 240 years in prison, which is technically a death sentence. For the past 19 years, I have been examining, reflecting, and humbling myself before the Most High. With any wrongful imprisonment, a person is going to feel a ton of emotions such as anger, resentment, fear, forgiveness, humbleness, and peace. I also reflected on my past and how I got here. A reading of the Post-Tribune in 1977 was the year my father, Eugene Evans, was murdered. I was only 18 months old. His unsolved murder was just one of many in a city once crowned the murder capital of the world. Growing up, my most treasured childhood memory was a wallet-sized photo that my mother kept in her purse. As a child, I was fond of staring at the picture of my father wearing an all-white uniform and standing on a big ship. I'd hold imaginary conversations with him. Do you like basketball? How about wrestling? Other times I imagined he was simply lost at sea and was going to walk through the front door at any moment. But as I grew older, seeing his image frozen for all of time in his navy dress whites, eventually he just became a picture of a ghost I never knew. Fatherless, growing up in the 1980s, and raised by a poor, single, black mother with a household full of siblings trapped in a city buried in hopelessness. My adolescence was fertile ground for foolishness to take root, and take root it did. Was from the ghetto, uneducated, black, and addicted to fast money, and it ultimately would be that confluence of character traits that allowed the police to see me as just shady enough that when a horrifically violent crime occurred on January 16, 2004, and one of the self-confessed perpetrators, Lenzo Aaron, I, decided to point the finger at me to save his own skin, they believed him, despite me having no past history of being violent. Chapter 1. A tragic day in Gary. On or about January 16th to 17th, 2004, 4 innocent people tragically lost their lives. The victims included a precious toddler, Anthony McClendon Jr., who was just a mere 19 days away from his 2nd birthday. The other 3 victims were Anthony McClendon Jr.'s father, Anthony McClendon, Sr. and Loris, and Jimmy Jones. As the police began to piece together the puzzle of what had happened, the entire city held its breath, yearning for answers and justice. A suspicious investigation. Detective Michael J. Jackson was appointed as head detective to investigate the quadruple homicide. Several days after the homicides, a $100,000 reward was made public regarding any information leading to the arrest or convictions of the perpetrators responsible for the crime. Tip after tips poured in, and between January 19th and 20th, 2004, Detective Michael J. Jackson was contacted by a person who didn't want to identify himself at first. Days later, the unidentified man met up with Detective Jackson and was identified as Jeffrey L. Lewis. Mr. Lewis informed Detective Jackson that he received information from his brother, James W. Parks, confessing to his involvement in the homicides. In addition, according to Lewis, Parks implicated Lenzo Aaron and Antonio D. Jones as his accomplices. Parks never confirmed what Lewis alleged. However, Detective Jackson never considered Lewis as a suspect in spite of his past criminal background of giving false information to the police, robbery, and armed robbery. He just took Lewis's story and ran with it. Thereafter, Lenzo Aaron, I was arrested on an unrelated charge. After his arrest, Aaron was interrogated regarding his alleged involvement in the quadruple homicide, wherein Aaron denied having any involvement in the homicides or knowledge of who may have committed the crime. It wasn't until a private meeting was held between Aaron, his parents, and a detective that never testified during Jones's trial, nor was the meeting recorded. Detective Jackson claimed that he did not attend the meeting of a star witness to a quadruple homicide, but yet took his statement. Also, Detective Jackson was best friends with Aaron's father, who was a Gary City fire chief. As a result of the friendship between Aaron's father and Detective Jackson, it negatively influenced the integrity of Detective Jackson to properly investigate the case. Like, for instance, Aaron changed his original position of not having any involvement in the crime, or knowledge of who may have committed the crime to him admitting he was involved but only as a lookout. Aaron minimized his role in the murders in spite of most, if not all, of the victims being shot with the weapon Aaron admitted to carrying on the night of the murders. Detective Jackson also ignored Aaron's violent criminal past of attempting to murder Anthony McClendon's brother. When Aaron was just 16 years old and in the 10th grade, he was charged and convicted of shooting Roosevelt Pickett with an assault rifle, the exact same type of weapon Aaron admitted to having during the quadruple homicide. There was other material physical evidence Detective Jackson turned a blind eye to. Evidence of a phone call from McClendon to Jones that did not exist, and the motive for the 3 going to the 2600 Polk Street residence. The physical evidence that was collected by Detective Jackson and his team proves that Aaron's story and testimony were false. It didn't stop Detective Jackson and the state of Indiana from turning a blind eye to the physical evidence and siding with Aaron to railroad Antonio D. Jones, who is an innocent man. Chapter 2. The Call That Did Not Exist. Lenzo Aaron's false testimony bearing false witness regarding a call being made to Antonio D. Jones from Anthony McClendon Sr. which allegedly led to Jones' plot to rob McClendon of his $6,000 McClendon allegedly had in his possession to purchase cocaine with. For the record, no evidence of a call exists to support Aaron's false testimony bearing false witness. More specifically, Aaron claimed that he was in Jones's presence between the hours of 10:30 to 10:45 p.m., wherein Jones received a call from McClendon, with McClendon allegedly telling Jones he has $6,000 and asked Jones for a ride to go buy some cocaine. Aaron claimed that as a result of the call Jones received, Jones created a plan to rob McClendon of his $6,000. Aaron further claimed that him, Jones, and a guy by the name of James W. Parks arrived at McClendon's residence at 11 p.m. to commit the alleged robbery. But there was one problem with Aaron's story. There is absolutely no evidence of a call made to Jones from McClendon between the hours of 10:30 and 10:45 p.m. to support Aaron's story. See pictures of the call records. The state of Indiana knew that Aaron's testimony/story were at odds with the phone records, but plotted to keep the truth from the jury, denying Antonio D. Jones his right to a fair trial. Chapter 3. The motive that did not exist. In addition to there being no evidence presented of a call being made to Jones from the victim Anthony McClendon between the hours of 10:30 to 10:45 p.m. for Jones to plot a robbery, there also was no evidence of a motive for Jones to go to the 2600 Polk Street residence either. Remember, Aaron claimed that McClendon called Jones for a ride to go buy some cocaine, and as a result of Jones allegedly learning that McClendon had $6,000 to buy some cocaine with, allegedly Jones then devised a plan to rob McClendon of his $6,000. With the above in mind, the evidence collected by detectives at the scene of the crime clearly proves that McClendon already had a substantial amount of cocaine in his possession. Why would McClendon call Jones for a ride to go get something he already have a great amount of? There were crime scene photos taken of cocaine being cooked on a stove, a large amount of cocaine being found in a kid's shoebox, in addition to another large amount of cocaine found in a flower pot. In addition to that, there was never any evidence presented to support that McClendon was even in possession of $6,000. In fact, there was no evidence of any money being recovered. In fact, Aaron claimed that James W. Parks gave him $230, not Mr. Jones, who Aaron falsely claimed set this entire ordeal up. So, not only was there no evidence of a call being made to Jones, but there is also no evidence of a motive for Jones to go to the 2600 Polk Street residence to take McClendon to go buy some cocaine because he already had a large amount of it in his possession. Furthermore, there was no evidence of McClendon being in possession of $6,000. If he was then, according to Aaron, his cut would have been $2,000, not $230. The state of Indiana turned a blind eye to the physical evidence it recovered, proving that Aaron's story was not worthy of belief and ridiculous. Rather than the state of Indiana doing the right thing, acting with the integrity afforded to them by our United States Constitution, and revealing the truth, where the evidence took them, they went down the dark road of lies and deceit that ultimately robbed an innocent man of his freedom and God-given right to a fair trial. Chapter 4. Antonio D. Jones's alibi witnesses were never called to testify, and the state's fabrication of evidence to discredit Albert Hart. The undeniable truth of the matter is that on January 16, 2004, at approximately 10:30 to 11:30 p.m., Mr. Antonio D. Jones was with Albert Hart and Justin Kirk. The ludicrous part of this entire ordeal is, unlike Lenzo Aaron's testimony that is contradicted by overwhelming physical evidence proving his testimony was false bearing false witness, there is evidence to support Hart and Jones's version of events, but the state turned a blind eye to this evidence because it didn't support their false accusations against Jones. Mr. Hart testified to him clocking out from his job at the call center between the hours of 9:54 p.m. or 9:56 p.m. on January 16, 2004. Mr. Hart's work records and his cellular phone records supported Mr. Hart's testimony. Mr. Hart said when he called Jones, He asked Jones what was he doing tonight. Jones replied, "Nothing. I am at this party in Oak Knolls." Mr. Hart didn't testify to his reasons for calling Jones because he didn't want to incriminate himself as criminal act, but Jones did during his testimony. Jones testified to Mr. Hart calling him daily after he got off of work to purchase marijuana for him and his cousin to smoke. On this particular night, Jones had sold all the marijuana he had on him at the party. So when Mr. Hart called Jones for some weed, Jones informed Hart that he had sold all the weed he had on him, but if he gave him a ride to East Chicago, he could give him the weed he wanted to buy. Mr. Hart agreed and said he would be to pick Jones up in 20 or 30 minutes after he picked his cousin, Justin Kirk. This arrangement worked out perfect for Jones because he had been drinking at the party and was too intoxicated to drive. Mr. Hart and his cousin, Justin Kirk, picked Jones up from the Oak Knolls apartment complex, wherein Jones was sitting in his car waiting. Mr. Hart picked Jones up between 10:30 and 10:40 p.m., and the three drove to East Chicago to get the weed, and at approximately 11:30 p.m., Mr. Hart dropped Jones back off in Oak Knolls. To discredit Mr. Hart, the state of Indiana had the toddler's mother to testify to a conversation she claimed to have had with Mr. Hart. According to Miss Ronielle Hearn, Mr. Hart allegedly told her that on the night of the crime, Antonio Jones made the following statement: "I have to take this nigga's money or his life." Mr. Hart denied ever telling Miss Hearn this, and in fact, Mr. Hart testified under oath that he doesn't even know Miss Hearn to tell her something like that. This was just another tactic used by the state of Indiana to get incriminating information before the jury to prevent Jones from receiving a fair trial. Had Mr. Kirk been called as a witness, he could have corroborated Mr. Hart and Jones's testimony, but since his testimony did not benefit the state's case against Jones, Mr. Kirk was never called to testify. In addition, since Jones' appointed counsel was working with the state of Indiana to frame Jones, he refused to call Mr. Kirk as well. Chapter 5. The evidence proving the truth that Antonio D. Jones is innocent. For the record, Aaron claimed that during a party that him, Jones, and Parks separately attended that Jones received a call from Anthony McClendon, Sr., wherein McClendon allegedly told Jones that he had $6,000 and asked Jones for a ride to go buy some cocaine. According to Aaron, as a result of the call Jones received, he devised a plan to rob Mr. McClendon of his $6,000. The evidence in the record does not support Aaron's testimony. See the following. 1. Alibi witnesses. Jones had two alibi witnesses via Albert Hart and Justin Kirk, who placed Jones with them in East Chicago, Indiana, between the hours of 10:30 p.m. 11:30 p.m., Lenzo Aaron alleged that he, Jones, and Parks arrived at the victim, Anthony McClendon's residence at 11 p.m. to commit the alleged robbery. What Aaron testified to is inherently unbelievable and inconsistent with Mr. Hart's testimony and Mr. Kirk's statement. 2. The phone records clearly shows there was no call made to Antonio D. Jones and the victim Anthony McClendon. Lenzo Aaron testified to being in Jones's presence when he received a call from Anthony McClendon. Being that, Aaron testified to the three arriving at McClendon's home at 11 p.m. to commit the alleged robbery. The call Aaron was referring to had to occur between the hours of 10:30 and 10:45 p.m. Mr. McClendon's number was 219-677-3081 and Jones's number was 219-201-5444. The crime occurred on January 16, 2004. 3. Lenzo Aaron's false testimony regarding the motive for the three to go to 2600 Polk Street residence was inconsistent with the physical evidence as well. Lenzo Aaron testified to McClendon calling Jones for a ride to go buy some cocaine. However, the physical evidence of the crime scene photos clearly showed that a large amount of drugs were found cooking on the stove, also in a kid's shoes box and in a flower pot. Why would McClendon call Jones to take him to go get drugs when he already had such a significant amount? Loris Jones got shot so many more times than Aaron alleged. For a witness who claimed he stood right in front of her, the entire time he was in the 2600 Polk Street residence. Lenzo Aaron claimed that Jones allegedly came out the back and left out the front door, leaving going to the car. That at this point Mrs. Loris Jones and the baby were not injured. However, that James Parks came out the back and told him Aaron to finish the lady off, and according to Aaron, he told Parks that he was not killing no lady or baby. Aaron go on to say he left the residence, and as he was going down the stairs he heard 2 shots, meaning Mrs. Jones was supposed to have gotten shot 2 times. However, if you review Mrs. Loris Jones's autopsy diagram, you will see that Mrs. Jones got shot at least 10 times. How could Aaron miss 8 additional shots? The state of Indiana ignored Jones's 2 alibi witnesses, the phone records, the crime scene photos, and Mrs. Loris Jones's autopsy diagram, proving that Lenzo Aaron was less than forthcoming regarding what allegedly occurred. Chapter 6. Antonio Jones refusing to allow his wrongful conviction to define him. In the midst of his darkness, our Lord Jesus is faithful to free him at the appointed time. Being sentenced to serve 240 years is a devastating reality for anyone to accept, especially for a crime you know you didn't commit. Jones came to prison at the age of 29 years old, functionally illiterate and lost. This was a dark time in Jones's life, but he knew that everything happens for a reason, and rather than focusing on the negatives of his situation, he would focus on the positives. The positives of Jones's ordeal is to use this time to invest in himself. Moreover, study the law in an effort to clear his name and prove his innocence. Speaking of Jones studying the law, he studied the law so much that other prisoners gave him the nickname Law. Jones started his journey by enrolling in GED classes to obtain his high school diploma, and vowed to read 3 case laws a day to develop a reading habit. Being sentenced to serve 240 years in prison is a devastating reality for anyone to accept, especially for a crime you know you didn't commit. Jones came to prison at the age of 29 years old, functionally illiterate and lost. This was a dark time in his life, but he knew that everything happens for a reason, and rather than questioning God, asking him, "Why me? O Lord, why me?" he just simply asked for guidance, strength, protection, and peace as he embarked on this journey. Jones has always been a spiritually grounded individual, raised in church with unmoving faith. Also, everybody who is somebody had to go through something to become the person God intended on them becoming. Who is Martin Luther King without his dream? Jones is no different. Rather than stressing about his time and being angry at the world, he channeled his energy into something more constructive and productive by using his time to work on himself. He enrolled in classes to obtain his high school diploma. Prior to enrollment, he was reading and writing on a 2nd or 3rd grade level. Moreover, Jones also enrolled in and completed countless rehabilitative programs. Being that he could not afford to hire a lawyer, and even if he could afford one, the Lake County lawyer community made it abundantly clear that they were not representing him. So Jones started reading 3 case laws a day. When he came across words he wasn't familiar with, he would look up the definition and use it in a complete sentence. Next, Jones studied the Indiana Constitution, the United States Constitution, and the Indiana Rules of Evidence. There was one thing missing for him to learn, and that was how to argue his issues before the court. Jones studied briefs argued by the Indiana Attorney General Office and read different books on drafting up a brief. He was determined to fight to clear his name. If it produced good results, it would be worth it. However, if it didn't, he would have no regrets regarding the what-ifs. Jones eventually obtained his high school diploma, completed every rehabilitative program the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility had to offer. In addition, he obtained 2 apprenticeships, maintained meaningful employment, and remained conduct clear in the 20 years Jones spent in a maximum security prison. He even volunteered his time mentoring other prisoners who suffer from mental illness and prisoners with behavioral issues who came to prison as juveniles. Switching topics, Jones litigated his case pro se through the state and federal courts, including to the United States Supreme Court. Although it didn't produce a favorable decision for him, he is still grateful for his journey and all that he has achieved as a result. Mr. Jones hates the circumstances of 4 innocent people losing their lives, including a precious toddle, wherein his heart go out to the victims and to all that were affected by their loss. What brings Jones great peace is the fact that he knows he is innocent, and through the course of 20 years he has demonstrated that in his everyday walk. Other prisoners look up to him because he leads by example. Jones remembered when he first came to Wabash, he was met by the warden, and the warden asked Jones, "Sir, are we going to have any problems out of you?" Jones responded, "No." From that day in 2004 until today of February 17, 2024, there has not been one incident involving him. He gave his word until this very day. He has stuck to it. The importance of sharing Mr. Jones's story is to first and foremost get the truth out, be heard, and hopefully to get him some help from people who are a little more experienced than he is. No matter what, Mr. Jones will continue to fight to clear his name until he stops breathing.
How can the people be free that has not learned to be just? Said Emmanuel Joseph Sound. And injustice anywhere is a threat against justice everywhere, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My guilt was not proven beyond a reasonable doubt, as required by the Indiana United States Constitution. Absolutely no physical evidence connects me to the scene of the crime because I was with Albert Hart and Justin Kemp in East Chicago, Indiana. Lynn Orange's testimony was contradicted by overwhelming physical evidence, proving what he testified to did not line up with the phone records, the crime scene photo, non-alibi witnesses' testimony, or the autopsy diagram of Louise Jones. The Seventh Circuit Court of Jones versus Basinger found Aaron's testimony to be inherently unbelievable and inconsistent with other evidence. I simply had nothing to do with this crime. I was found guilty based solely upon inadmissible evidence that had nothing to do with my guilt or innocence, but used solely for the purpose of inflaming the passion of the jury against me, and to cast me in a negative light before the jury. People must understand that jurors are easily persuaded and are not legally trained professionals. That being said, it is easy for them to mistake inadmissible evidence that is not supposed to be used in deciding a defendant's guilt as admissible evidence. Prosecutors often use inadmissible evidence to persuade the jury in reaching an incorrect verdict, which leads to countless wrongful convictions. For the record, I was offered a way out, which would have severely reduced my sentence, my 240-year sentence, prior to my second trial, and according to the appointed counsel. The state of Indiana offered me a plea for 45 to 65 years, which means that I would have been home right now on the low end of that plea, or I have less than 9 years left on the high end of that plea. I rejected that plea offer because I couldn't, in good conscience, accept a plea for a crime I did not commit. On a different note, I sympathize with the family of the victims. Seeing the anger, hurt, and pain on their faces was unbearable. Having to sit through not one trial, but 2 trials, and having to view gruesome photos took a lot out of me. In all honesty, I am not even capable of killing. Prior to being framed in this crime, I had absolutely no violent criminal history. In fact, I have been incarcerated for 20 years in a maximum security prison, and I have never had not one incident involving anything violent. I have been a model prisoner. The state of Indiana painted me to be a monster, but my everyday walk shows something completely different. The prosecutors can paint anyone as a monster, even Pope Francis, but it doesn't make it true. My call to action is for people to go to change.org and sign your support for the governor to pardon me. My petition is titled Justice for Antonio Jones. I accept any help or support anyone is willing to provide. Last, if you are interested in learning more about me or my case, you can reach me by going to connectnetwork.com and sign up to message Antonio D. Jones, DOC number 145609, and I will immediately message you back, or you can write me at 6908 South Old U.S. Highway 41, Caroline, Indiana, Caroline, Carlisle, Indiana 47838. Thank you for your time and support, and God bless you.